Hi everyone, it's Saul, and today I am once again back in the Peak District, where this time we're picking things up right where we left off in the last video, in Castleton. So as you may recall, at the end of the last video, I paid a quick visit to Castleton to kill some time after I missed my bus home from Hathersage. I couldn't go too far though, having just finished a lengthy walk along Stanage Edge, so I decided that the sights of Castleton would be best left for my next video. And here we are, so without further ado, let's take a look at today's route. So we're starting today's walk from the bus station in Castleton and heading west along Old Mam Tor Road to Odin Mine. From there we'll ascend to the summit of Mam Tor along the route of the former A625. Mam Tor marks the western end of Great Ridge, which we'll follow for about 2 miles to back Tor and Lose Hill. From there we begin our descent to Lose Hill Lane, then Edale Road, and finally into the village of Hope. To complete our journey we'll follow a small footpath which runs alongside Peaks Hole Water, taking us back to Castleton. All in all, today's walk is about 13.25 kilometres, or a bit over 8 miles, with the highest point being 517 metres at the summit of Mam Tor, and the lowest being about 170 metres in Hope. Along the way I will of course be sharing some interesting facts about the various landmarks we pass, and what better way to start than with the crushing wheel and surface workings of Odin Mine. So I'm currently at the Odin Mine stone circle, and hopefully future Saul will have some interesting facts to share with you about this area. Right now I'm just going to sit here for a minute and take my first break of the day. Now, there have been many mines in Castleton over the years, and the area is most famous for a mineral called Blue John, a type of fluorite with purple and yellow bands which isn't found anywhere else on Earth. However, the town also has a long history of lead mining, which brings us to Odin Mine. Odin Mine is not only one of the oldest lead mines in the country, it's also the single oldest mine of any kind in Derbyshire, with workings going back as far as the 13th century. Initially, the mine was open cast, but once the surface lead had been exhausted, miners followed the vein underground, eventually creating a complex network of tunnels some 1,500 metres in length. What appears today to be a natural ravine is actually a man-made excavation and houses the entrance to the underground portion of the mine. The crushing wheel, which makes use of gritstone quarried in the area, was installed in 1823 at a cost of £40, around £4,000 today. There we go, the weather has finally come good. I was a little bit worried that it was going to be a miserable day, but the sun is finally out, which means we got climbing to do. Okay, I'm currently walking along what remains of the A625, and we don't actually need future Saul for this one, because I already know a thing or two about this road. So the A625 was once a major through road between Sheffield and Manchester, and as you can see, it snakes its way up the southern side of Mam Tor. Unfortunately, because Mam Tor is very prone to landslides, the road was closed several times for repairs, and each time the repairs were more and more costly. Eventually, by the end of the 70s, they decided to just close the road completely and route traffic through nearby Winnett's Pass. The road has remained abandoned ever since, showing you just what 50 years of Mother Nature can do. I can't help but wonder what might have happened if they hadn't decided to close the road in 1979. How much longer could they have kept repairing it before they abandoned all hope? Could it still be open to this day? Probably not. Okay, here's the view so far. We're still nowhere near the top, really, but even from here you can get a great view. We've still got all that to do yet. So as we approach the summit of Mam Tor, now is probably a good time for me to tell you more about it. The hill, whose name means Mother Hill, dominates the landscape down in Castleton, and as mentioned earlier, frequent landslides caused by loose shale have given the hill its iconic look. Atop the hill are the remains of a late Bronze Age hill fort, and as we'll see later, various artifacts from the site are displayed along the side of the footpath. Okay, we're getting near to the top of Mam Tor now, and I am exhausted. This is definitely a much steeper climb than anything I did on my last trip. But we're nearly there, and when we're at the top, I think I'll take a bit of a break. And at last I arrived at the summit of Mam Tor, which, as you can see, was incredibly busy. So many people out enjoying the sun, and at 517 metres above sea level, this trig point marks the highest point of today's journey. After a quick break to admire the view, I set my sights on Tor and Lose Hill, the latter of which lies 2 miles to the east along Great Ridge. A paved footpath runs along most of the ridge, and this was also very busy, so there won't be any more piece-to-camera stuff until after Lose Hill. I did, however, get some fantastic shots of the Vale of Edale to the north and Hope Valley to the south. I stopped for a quick bite to eat by these stone cairns, most of which have been assembled quite recently. While cairns of old were used as navigational waypoints, today they're more of a tradition, with walkers creating their own or contributing stones to an existing pile. Getting back on the trail, I soon arrived at Hollins Cross, where a herd of cows had wandered their way onto the footpath. Hollins Cross is the lowest point on Great Ridge and is marked by a memorial to hiker Tom Hyatt of the Long Eaton Ramblers Association. From here, the path starts to climb again, heading towards a hill which seemingly has no name, but we'll get to that later because at this point I was distracted by my other great passion: trains. Yes, for the rail fans among you, the Hope Valley line runs right through the Vale of Edale, and there's an almost constant flow of traffic. I don't want to turn this into a train spotting video, but for those who are interested, the line is served by Northern, Trans-Pennine Express and East Midlands Railway, as well as carrying limestone from the various quarries in the area and cement from the Hope Valley plant. With Tor and Lose Hill still looming in the distance, I pressed on, though the footpath beyond this point was much rougher. I have to say, Tor was probably the highlight of this walk for me. The way it overlooks the Vale of Edale with an almost sheer cliff face on its northern side is incredible. It was also by far the steepest climb of the day, but the view from the top was such a reward. And off in the distance there you can see Mam Tor and the ridge path I walked along to get here. With Tor conquered, it was on to Lose Hill, and this was a considerably easier climb compared to the previous section. At the top of the hill I found this toposcope, a sort of map which shows the direction and distance of nearby peaks. As mentioned earlier, the hill between Tor and Hollins Cross doesn't appear on the toposcope, and I was unable to find any mention of its name online, so presumably it just doesn't have one. After snapping a few photos, including my only selfie of the day, I began the long descent from Lose Hill down to Hope. I also want to quickly mention Win Hill, which lies just across the valley near Bamford. Now you might be thinking, surely there's an interesting story behind the names of these two hills, right? Well, there's an interesting story alright, but it's completely untrue. The story goes that in the 7th century the armies of the kingdoms of Northumbria and Wessex did battle in the Hope Valley. The Wessex forces occupied Lose Hill, while the Northumbrians occupied Win Hill. In the end, the Northumbrians won out and the two hills were named respectively. While it's a great story, there is absolutely no evidence that this battle ever happened, and in reality the two names are pure coincidence. Lose is believed to come from the Old English word hlose, meaning pigsty, while win most likely comes from within, meaning willow. So we're now on what is essentially our final descent into the Hope Valley. If I just turn around, you can see we're on our way down this quite steep path towards the River No, and then in about half an hour's time we should be arriving in Hope. Of course, I am going to be walking from Hope back to Castleton, essentially completing the circle for today's trip. So just over there is Hope Valley Cement Works. You may have seen it in the background of both this video and the last. It's certainly a, shall we say, prominent landmark in the valley. I just can't get over how high Lose Hill is. It feels like I've walked twice as far as we did last time. And don't get me wrong, I do absolutely love Stanage Edge, but this felt like so much more of a challenge. So I've just passed under the railway bridge, which takes freight trains from Earl's Sidings to Hope Cement Works. Okay, I am finally sat down on a proper bench for the first time today. We just passed through the village of Hope, and just behind me there is the public footpath, which is going to take us back to Castleton. I haven't even had my sandwiches yet. I've got cheese and piccalilli. I did bring ploughman's last time, but thought I'd keep it simple today. And then I've also got a little bit of red pepper, some pak choy, one of my favourites, and a big old tomato. Incidentally, while I was eating my lunch, there was a lot of traffic for the cement works along this road. Because of its location within a national park, the plant is required to move at least 2/3 of its product by rail, but sadly, even with that requirement, a lot of goods are still moved by road. And with my packed lunch exhausted, it's time to get back on the move. So now we're back on the footpath. It should be about a 30-minute walk to Castleton. Then I've got a decision to make. I can either get my bus back home, or I can wait for the next one, which is an hour later, and have a walk up Cave Dale instead. So the footpath I'm on right now runs alongside Peak's Hole Water, which actually originates from Peak Cavern in Castleton and flows east into the River No, which in turn flows into the Derwent, which flows into the Trent, which flows into the Humber. So this water here will eventually make its way to the North Sea. So once again, there is Hope Valley Cement Works. We're pretty close to it now. And just here is the railway line which connects the plant to Hope Earl's Sidings. And as you can see, it looks like we're going over it on a foot crossing. So this right here is the line to Hope Valley Cement Works. It's just down there. Here's the foot crossing, and off in that direction is Earl's Sidings. Now, unfortunately, I didn't encounter any trains at the crossing on this occasion, but if you'll indulge my inner train spotter for the second time today, the line is almost exclusively operated by Class 20 locomotives. This is because the line is unsuitable for heavier traffic, so wagons are moved in small batches between the plant and Earl's Sidings. So just to recap, by the way, today we have walked all the way up to the top of Mam Tor, along that ridge to Lose Hill, back down into Castleton, and now we're on our way back. And finally, after 5 hours and just over 8 miles of walking, I arrived back in Castleton. I made it with time to spare for the bus back to Sheffield, but I still had plenty of energy, so I decided to wait for the next one and head to Cave Dale. Cave Dale is an extremely narrow valley which sits above Peak Cavern, also known as the Devil's Arse, the eastern end of the largest cave network in the Peak District, and both were formed by glacial meltwater eroding through the softer limestone in this area. There are many small cave entrances within the dale, and while most are not traversable, they do connect to the Peak Cavern system. Atop the almost vertical western wall lies Peveril Castle, an early Norman castle erected sometime between 1066 and 1086 when it first appeared in the Domesday Book. Okay, I am officially giving up on reaching the top of Cave Dale. I genuinely have no idea how much further it goes, but my bus back is in 45 minutes and I really need to start heading back down again. So, sorry Cave Dale, you defeated me. Maybe next time. I'm off. Look at these guys. These have got no problem climbing these hills. They're certainly better at it than me. When I got back to the village, I still had 20 minutes to spare, so I took a seat by the war memorial, finished off my snacks, and relaxed in the afternoon sun. When I got home, I had a quick look on Google Maps and found that I'd reached this point about 950 metres into the dale, which meant that by the time I got back to the bus station, I'd walked a grand total of 16 kilometres, or just shy of 10 miles. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. This project was even bigger and more ambitious than Stanage Edge, and I actually captured almost an hour of footage. So if you want to see the raw, uncut footage of the trip, please consider supporting me on Patreon using the link in my bio. Until next time, bye bye.